Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Hello, friends. Nevertheless, Nichiren continues, the schools of Buddhism other than the Tendai have gone astray concerning the true aim of Buddhist practice. The Dharma Analysis Treasury, the Establishment of Truth, the Precepts schools take as their aim of practice the Shakyamuni Buddha who eliminated illusions and attained the way by practicing 34 kinds of spiritual purification. In other words, they're emulating the man, Shakyamuni, and his practice, being a monk, being a student. To them, that's how they pursue achieving something that they do not know. They're learning about it. For them, Buddha or Buddha-ness is something that somehow gets conferred on you by your studies, right? This is comparable to a situation where the heir apparent of a supreme ruler of a state mistakenly believes himself to be the son of a commoner. So you don't realize that Buddhahood is innate. Do you see the chasm there? The 4 schools of the flower garland, true word, 3 treatises, and the Dharma characteristics are all Mahayana schools of Buddhism. And among them, the Dharma characteristics and the 3 treatises school, they honor a Buddha who is comparable to the Buddha of the superior manifested body. In other words, they're still, their goal, their achievement is to be not Shakyamuni as Siddhartha Gautama, but Shakyamuni as Shakyamuni Buddha, like him, the man, enlightened. That's what they're trying, their goal, their prize to achieve. Again, outside themselves. The only thing that puts things outside ourselves is ego. That's what they're missing. Let's continue. This is like the heir of the supreme ruler supposing that his father was a member of a warrior class. Like you somehow have to go through a gauntlet to achieve what your father had achieved. A status, in other words. The flower garland and true word schools look down upon Shakyamuni Buddha. That always twists my brain. And declare the Buddha Varachana and Buddha Mahavarachana to be their respective objects of devotion, their distant goal of emulation. Again, not perceiving the truth as within themselves. They don't get it. They're so stuck in their samsaric humanity that they can't accept that Buddha-ness is readily accessible. They have to achieve something close to it, and that somehow, someday, this will be conferred upon them from without. Same problem. This is like the heir, H-E-I-R, the heir looking down upon his own father, the supreme ruler, and paying honor to one who is of obscure origin simply because that person pretends to be the sovereign who abides by the principles of righteousness. And rather, I will surpass my father in whatever that father seems to have achieved. Again, it's all samsaric, right? The Pure Land School considers itself to be mostly closely related to Buddha Amida, right? Amitabha, who is an emanation of Shakyamuni, a conjured personage that Shakyamuni used to teach, but they follow it rather than Shakyamuni. And they abandon Shakyamuni himself, who is the fountain of the teachings, the originator. How does that make sense to anyone? The Zen school. We've heard a lot about Zen in the West, yeah? The Zen school behaves like a person of low birth who makes much of his small achievements and despises his father and mother. Wow. Now, a lot of you who have been exposed to Zen might take exception to this, but listen to what Nichiren says. Thus, the Zen school looks down upon the Buddha and the sutras. All of these schools are misled concerning the true aim of practice. They are like the people who lived in the age before the three sovereigns of ancient China and did not know who their own fathers were. In that respect, the people of that time were no different from birds and beasts. Right? The key component they're all missing is this abundant, innate nature and how to awaken it, how to be in it. They just totally miss that point. They keep studying and studying, but the way they study, the way they interpret their studies is to gain some kind of passage and then be bequeathed this honor, when all the while it's been in their very own being. They're missing the point of Shakyamuni's teachings, of Buddha. Yeah? Namo Myo Renge Kyo. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for liking and subscribing, helping to grow this channel, supporting this channel through liking and subscribing, to downloading the podcast. This resource is about strengthening your practice. That's the only reason this exists. And so if you can, support it by liking, subscribing, buying the ebooks off threefoldlotus.com. They're very affordable, and you get them immediately. Or if you like print books like me, you can go to lulu.com. You know, the links are in the video. And you can buy the print books, other sources. There's a lot more sources on the print bookstore than there are in the ebooks. I've tried to keep the ebooks pretty focused on our practice, our Nichiren doctrine of the Lotus Sutra. But by all means, if you see a print book that I haven't thought of that you think would be really helpful as an ebook, let me know in the comments, email me, and I will go through it and make that PDF available as an ebook download. I'm not looking right now. I'm too busy researching other stuff, but so please feel free to remind me, okay? All right, so let's continue with Nichiren here. And what is he trying to, I think he's pretty clear, but the translation doesn't seem as clear as Nichiren does it? He continues, the people of these schools who are ignorant of the teachings of the lifespan chapter are similarly like beasts. And this is something we have to remember in our practice. We know other Buddhists. We know other Buddhists who call themselves followers of Nichiren, of Bodhisattva Nichiren. Some of them don't even call him Bodhisattva Nichiren. They call him by other names. There's a lot of misunderstanding today about these teachings. And so, as independent Buddhists, you and I, all over the world, our Sangha is worldwide. We have to have compassion for those who are trying. They're being misled by bad teachers. And ultimately, what do you hear me say all the time? This is your practice. This is our practice. It's an individual practice. So at some point, you have to take responsibility for being misled, yeah? And tear yourself away from it. You and I, like many people, have practiced for a little while and noticed, this can't be right. This doesn't agree with what I'm reading. Why do they keep saying this? Unfortunately, we're social creatures. And so we take some comfort in being part of a group. But listen, this practice is far more profound than that, right? And at some point, you have to get over your neediness for the group being loved. And as a Buddhist, there are plenty of things we can do in life to feel loved, validated, and part of groups. But with our Buddhist practice, that's to be, as Nichiren says, single-mindedly seeking Buddha. That's what this practice is. That's what all of these sects are missing. And all of these misled people are missing. Chanting for new cars or chanting for better relationships. Man, this is not Aladdin's lamp. This is a self-discovery, right? What could be more profound? All of that other stuff, it's unimportant. It may seem important at the moment, but that's because of our attachments. The very thing that Shakyamuni spent his whole life trying to get people to understand. You're suffering because of your attachment to things. So why are you chanting for more attachment? How anti-Buddhist is that? Right? But we can't hit people over the head with it. Sometimes we have to, hey, open your eyes. Look at what you're doing. But always with compassion, right? Sometimes when we love somebody, we have to break their pattern, right? I had a friend who used to call it a pattern interrupt. Even in ourselves, we find ourselves stuck in something, whether it's a painting or working on a vehicle or a recipe or schoolwork or anything. You just have to pick yourself up and go, time out. I got to go take a walk. I got to walk around the building. I got to go take a bath. I've got to go splash some water in my face. Something, a pattern interrupt, so that I can unlock my brain of attachments and categorization and come back to something renewed, fresh, with a different perspective, yeah? Well, I mean, if that's not key to Buddhist practice, I don't know what is. This is why we chant, to kick that brain into gear, to open our mind of Buddha-ness, yeah? It's constantly like that. And it takes caring. It takes love and compassion. So sometimes you'll hear me, I get pretty strict about things, but I do it from a place of love. Please, stop hurting yourself. Stop getting in your own way. I know you don't see it right now, but please try to listen to what I'm saying to you. Mamo Myoho Renge Kyo. All right, we're not communicating well. Let's just sit down and chant together, okay? Let's just do that. It'll occur. Everyone has their moment or moments, right? How many moments did you have where you either had doubt or were unsure or you were pissed off until you finally said, I can't do this anymore, and you found Nichiren's teachings, Shakyamuni's teachings, anew for yourself? Well, that's what it should be all along. So no wonder you were frustrated. You didn't even really know why. You just knew something wasn't right. So here we are. Let's strengthen your practice, right? Nose itch. Sorry. So he goes on. The people of these schools, or people who are misled, right, are ignorant of the teachings of the lifespan chapter and similarly like beasts. In other words, we've talked about the lifespan chapter a lot, haven't we? I've equated it with Gohonzon, which I believe is what Nichiren is talking about in all of these letters. He talks about Mandala, this tool that he made to exemplify his focused understanding of this ultimate teachings of Shakyamuni, so that we could use it as a reference as well, right, to focus our samsaric consciousnesses. But that ninth consciousness that opens up, the only part of that mandala that leads directly to that mind opening, is the treasure tower in the middle. And we reflect that treasure tower into our own mind, Gohonzon. The treasure tower being Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. The I am single-mindedly meeting Buddha, invoking Buddha. By doing so, we go through the gate, the Gohonzon, to experience Buddha-ness, yes? And this is what he's describing. He's describing all these other schools as missing it. This is the thing they're not getting. And where is this thing made super obvious by Shakyamuni? In the lifespan chapter. Nichiren hinges his entire enlightenment on it. His doctrine. Not just the Lotus Sutra, not just the Threefold Lotus Sutra, all of it, but with a special focus to the lifespan chapter, and to elaborate on it, the treasure tower chapter. And then he continues through the rest of the chapters and builds around this one truth, this experience of Buddha-ness, the great Renge, the aha moment. And that's because it's already there, not because it's bequeathed to you or handed to you or you're qualified for it. It's an internal journey of awakening, yes, to something that's already there. They do not understand to whom they are obligated. The obligation of Buddha-ness and our awakening of Buddha-ness is to our life, to ourselves. Because by achieving our Buddha-ness in ourselves, remember, you and your environment are not separate things. So by enlightening my mind, I imbue my environment with that enlightenment. That includes you and her and him and them and the trees and the house and everything. Because we are all of the same energy, material, notwithstanding a manifestation of energy, of potential. That's why it's critical. It's not selfish. Right? Just like the example I've given before, if you've ever been on a commercial aircraft with those little air things that come down, they tell you constantly, even in their little pamphlets, before you help a child, put the darn thing on yourself. You do your child no good if you lose consciousness. So if you want to help those around you, you must first know from where you help. You don't help with your attachments, you help with your enlightenment. Therefore, Miao Lo states, quote, among all the teachings of the Buddha's lifetime, there is no place other than the lifespan chapter where the true longevity of the Buddha is revealed, where the nature of Buddha is revealed as concurrent with the engine of life. Buddha is the perception of it. It has no name. It's just the engine of life. It's life across the universe, yes? A person ought to know his own father and mother and who they are. We are of this engine of life. Witnessing that, getting that aha moment, that is knowing our parents. Right? The parent-teacher sovereign aspect, human aspect of knowing Buddha-ness. If a son does not know how old his father is, he will also be in doubt as to what lands his father presides over. Again, these are similes for the mind. If you don't know from where your mind comes from, how it's constructed, then how can you know the parameters of what it is you call mind? It's simple. Though he may be idly praised for his talent and ability, man, he chants good. Man, he knows a lot of sutras. he cannot be counted as a son at all. No matter how educated. Look at Devadatta. There's many stories about having great prowess in samsara, but if you don't understand the goal, the self-realization, the depth of it, the profundity, the immediacy of it, then you're playing. The great teacher Miao Lo lived in the Tianpao area, 742 to 756. Didn't live the era. In the latter part of the Tang dynasty, he made a deep and thorough examination of the three treatises, the flower garland, the Dharma characteristics, the true word, and other schools, and the sutras upon which they are based. Again, scholarship is the theme. Don't just go with one thing, right? Nichiren never does that. How many times were you told, just read this one thing, and that's it? That's where all the answers are. That's just not Nichiren's doctrine, is it? There's scarcely a letter of Nichiren's you can read where he doesn't refer to several different sources. That is why we study broadly, yeah? Then he concluded that if one fails to become acquainted with the Buddha of the lifespan chapter, one is no more than a talented animal who does not even know what lands his father presides over. Quote, though he may be idly praised for his talent and ability, end quote, refers to men like Fatsang and Chen Quan of the Flower Garland School or the Tripitaka master Shan Wu Wei of the True Word School. These teachers had talent and ability, yet they were like sons who did not even know their father because they missed the central point. They were looking for worldly acknowledgments and achievements rather than instantiating in each moment enlightenment, awakening, and radiating that enlightenment into and throughout their environment, others, and the environment, the universe. This is the core of Buddhism. And over and over again, people get enamored of the words, the poetry, the way it sounds. Oh, Buddhahood, yeah, we'll get to that, but this is important. How lamentable, yeah? The great teacher Dengyo was the patriarch of both esoteric and exoteric Buddhism in Japan. In his outstanding principles, he writes, quote, the sutras the other schools are based upon give expression in a certain measure to the mother-like nature of the Buddha, right? Coddles them, tells them, oh, you're doing so good, you're a good son. But they convey only a sense of love and are lacking a sense of fatherly sternness, right? A mother loves her children, but she's not very stern with them. If their children do foolish things, she's there to tell them it's okay, right? It's the father energy that corrects, that says, do you see what you did wrong? Let me show you what you did wrong so that you don't repeat this mistake. That's not really the domain of mothering, is it? So the child doesn't learn, or they're left to themselves to learn, and they're usually poor at self-teaching, like humans tend to be. It is only the Tendai school that combines a sense of both love and sternness. You have to be strict with yourself. The Lotus Sutra is the father of all sages, worthies, those still learning, those who have completed their learning, and those who have set their mind on becoming bodhisattvas, end quote. This is Dengyo. It fully tells you, as a Buddhist, It ain't about all flowers and scripture chases and knowing how to say all the things right. It's about the effort of your own self-realization, your internal development, not your brain, not your ego. Don't worry about what others think about you. See profoundly into the nature of what and who you are. And then you will see the true nature of everything. No need to impress. The sutras that form the basis of the true word and flower garland schools do not even contain the terms sowing or maturing or harvesting, much less the doctrine to which these terms refer. When the sutras of the flower garland and the true word schools assert that their followers will enter the first stage of development in this lifetime and achieve Buddhahood in their present form, they are putting forth the teachings of the provisional sutras alone, teachings that conceal the seeds of sowing in, the seeds sown in the past. To expect to harvest the fruit of Buddhahood without knowing the seed first sowed is like the minister Chao Kao attempting to seize the throne or the priest Dokyo trying to become emperor of Japan. So what's he saying in all that? That's just sounds like word salad, right? But once again, Nichiren is making the point that these teachers and these schools, and thereby the students, are all aiming to achieve something in this lifetime without knowing what that is. They're waiting to be bequeathed, right? Given a title. Because Buddhahood for them is a title achieved as another samsaric thing. Right? It's like saying, I'm good at track and field, but until I go to the Olympics and get a gold medal, I can't profess to be excellent at track and field. So you have a gold medallion. Good on you. But is that your essence? Is that what you're made of? It's certainly an accomplishment. But you haven't found Buddha. You have found samsaric excellence. Do you see? I wonder how many gold medallion recipients in the world go through a massive depression at some point because they realize, is that all I am? Right? To some, it may be fine. They may have a wonderful life after that, but they haven't achieved enlightenment. They've made achievements, but they're of the ego. They are of the self. They are of samsaric origin. Within them is Buddha. But that effort has served as more of a distraction than a help. Some, very few, may find some awakening in having achieved some physical goal like that. How much of it alters the way they live their life or how profoundly they know it, I can't say. But the point being is that Buddha-ness is in you all the time because it's simply your awareness of the engine of life, which is astounding. Once you really wrap your head around it, it's unfathomable. It's so immense. But how do you even know to look if you're constantly expecting it to be handed to you? And this is the wrestling match Nichiren is describing here. The various schools argue with one another, each claiming that its sutra contains the true seeds of enlightenment. I do not intend to enter into the argument. I will let the sutras speak for themselves. Thus, Bodhisattva Vasubandhu, speaking of the seeds of enlightenment implanted by the Lotus Sutra, designates them as the seeds without peer, end quote, quote unquote. And these seeds of enlightenment are the doctrine of the 3,000 realms in a single thought moment of life. That's where the door cracks and you perceive the ultimate reality, the ultimate truth, the ultimate Buddha-ness, right? The 3,000 realms in a single thought moment is the color, shape, and depth of Gohonzon, the opening gate, the window, the door, the passage, whatever you want to call it, that transmigratory mind from samsaric attachments and physicality to the mind of perception of the actual engine happening moment to moment to moment, that everything is instantiating and moving our momentum of being in time-space, yeah? Again, I say that. And these seeds of enlightenment are the doctrine of the 3,000 realms in a single thought moment of life, as expounded by Tendai. The seed of enlightenment for the various Buddhas described in the Flower Garland Sutra, the Mahavajrayana Sutra, the other variations or various Mahayana Sutras, is the one doctrine of the 3,000 realms in a single thought moment of life. And the great teacher Tendai, Chiche, was the only person who was capable of perceiving the truth of this doctrine in his day. Chen Quan of the Flower Garden School usurped the doctrine because, man, that's really insightful. I'm going to use it in my school. But it doesn't change that your school doesn't support this insight. You're just going to force feed it in there so you can claim to be on par with Tendai. This is what human beings do, yeah? And he made it the soul of the passage of the Flower Garland Sutra that reads, quote, "The mind is like a skilled painter." That misses the point. That's a wonderful statement, that the mind is a skilled painter. And we can apply a lot of, not similes, but metaphors and interpretations around that. But what it doesn't say is that the mind is the product of the engine of life, of the constant replenishment of opportunity, potential, instantiating via the previous moment, the energy that's pushing this moment into the next. Our golden opportunity to sense it, to be aware of it, and even to guide it. Agency. That's where agency happens. It doesn't sit around waiting for you to do something. Agency isn't something you pull out of the utensil drawer. It's an opportunity, and it's a very brief one, but it's constant. This is the aim, the goal of our practice, to be in there. The Mahavajrayana Sutra of the True Word School contains no mention of the fact that persons of the two vehicles can attain Buddhahood, an important part of the Lotus Sutra, indicating that this teaching, this one vehicle teaching, transcends all of that other stuff. Even though years have been spent telling the Hinayanists, you've scorched the seeds of Buddhahood, you'll never get there, you're too freaking arrogant. Everything for you is about samsara. Oh, no, it isn't. Yeah. Because you don't perceive that this Buddha-ness is your very causal being. You are an expression of Buddha-ness without being aware of it. So you busy yourself with all these other things as though that will get you where you already are. But you're too stubborn to see that. Because earthly reward means more to you than Buddha reward, yeah? They don't understand the reward body. It doesn't have any mention of the Shakyamuni Buddha achieving enlightenment in the distant past, or the doctrine of the 3,000 realms in a single thought moment of life. But after the Tripitaka master Shan Wu Wei came to China, he had occasion to read Great Concentration and Insight by Tendai, and came to gain wisdom and understanding. He then stole that doctrine of the 3,000 realms in a single thought moment of life, and used it to interpret the passages in the Mahavajracana Sutra on, quote, the reality of the mind, end quote, or the one that reads, quote, I am the source and the beginning of all things, end quote, making it the core of the true word teachings, but adding it to the practice of mudras and mantras, because those are fun. And in comparing the relative merits of the Lotus Sutra and the Mahavajracana Sutra, he declared that while the two agree in principle, the latter is superior in practice, because we get to dance and do all these other things. The mandalas of the two realms, the true word teachers claim, symbolize the attaining of Buddhahood by persons of the two vehicles and the mutual possession of the 10 worlds. But there are these doctrines to be found anywhere in the Mahavajracana Sutra? Those who claim so are guilty of the grossest deception. So this is interesting to understand too, because how many times have we had examples in human history where the provisional teaching of something that you learn along the way, and we ameliorate ourselves all the time. It's our natural process in life. And sometime later, somebody comes up with a better way to do something. Now, we can say, logistically, and we do in Buddhism, that those earlier teachings had value because they led us to this new insight. But there's always going to be somebody who's going to say, yeah, but that's not a new insight. It was over here all along. We said something different about it, but we're going to stay in our mediocre state, claiming that we have that insight and had it all along, just so we can say, identify ourselves as just as good. It's so upsetting and disappointing when humans do that, but they do it all the time. Yeah? In its simplest form, I meant to do that. No, you didn't. You didn't even know to do that. Thank you, Pee Wee Herman. Yeah? Therefore, the great teacher Dengyo states, quote, the true word school of Buddhism that has recently been brought to Japan deliberately obscures how its transmission was falsified in the recording by Yi Xing, who was deceived by Shan Wu Wei, while the flower garland school that was introduced earlier attempts to disguise the fact that it was influenced by the doctrines of Tendai. Why not just give Tendai credit? Why not just, now I knew something even more profound and no, ego, right? Suppose someone were to go to some wild region like the island of Izo and recite the famous poem, How I Think of It, Dim, dim in the morning mist of Akashi Bay, that boat moving out of sight beyond the islands. Nice little poem. If the person told the ignorant natives of Izo that he himself had composed the poem, they would probably have confidence in him. Wow, great poem. Wow, you're an amazing poet. He's a liar, but, right? The Buddhist scholars of China and Japan are equally gullible. He's making a critique of his own time in medieval Japan, all of these teachers who, if they can't stand on their own merit, stand on the merit of an aversion of tradition. Like, don't question me about how right this is. I'm carrying this down 400 years of tradition. That's what makes it right. How often do we see that in society? The Reverend Liang Shi states that the doctrines of the True Word School, Zen, Flower Garland, Three Treatises, and other schools, when compared with the Lotus Sutra, serve as none other than an introduction to the true teachings of the Lotus Sutra of Myoho Renge Kyo. We are told that the Tripitaka master Shanwu Wei was subjected to torments by Yama because of his mistaken view that the Mahavajrayana Sutra was superior to the Lotus Sutra. Later, he had a change of heart and became a supporter of the Lotus Sutra, which is why he was spared further torments. As evidence, when he, Pukung, and the others devised the womb realm mandala and the diamond realm mandala of the True Word School, they replaced the Lotus Sutra in the center of the two mandalas as the supreme ruler, with the Mahavajrayana Sutra depicting the womb realm and the Diamond Crown Sutra depicting the diamond realm to the left and right as ministers to the ruler. When Kobo of Japan drew up a theoretical statement of the True Word teachings, he was attracted by the Flower Garland School and assigned the Flower Garland School to the 9th stage of advancement and the Lotus Sutra to the 8th. But when he taught the practices and ceremonies to his disciples, Jitsu, Shinga, Encho, Kojo, and the others, he placed the Lotus Sutra in a central position between the two realms of the womb and the diamond, as Shanwu Wei and Pukung had done. This is org charts, right? Redistricting. In a similar case, Chiaxiang, and still they improved their position, is Nichiren's central point. Still hadn't completely gone Myoho Renge Kyo, had they? They still were supporting, but at least they were reordering things, acknowledging that the Lotus Sutra was a more central, more evolved, more important teaching. In a similar case, Chiaxiang of the Three Treatises school, in his 10-volume treatise on the profundity of the Lotus Sutra, assigned the Lotus Sutra to the 4th of the 5 periods of teachings, claiming that it repudiated the 2 vehicles to reveal the one vehicle of Bodhisattva, and then incorporated the former as a means to attain the latter. Later, however, he became converted to the teachings of Tendai. He ceased giving lectures, seeing the error of his ways. Right? Remember that story? Dismissed his disciples and instead served Tendai for a period of 7 years, personally carrying Tendai on his back when Tendai mounted an elevated seat for preaching. This was the humility of his finally coming to terms with, I've held on to these older teachings as though they owed a particular place in equitable appreciation to the 3,000 realms in a single thought moment in the Lotus Sutra. But I've come to find that I just had to let all of that crap go, that it was intermediary at best, and the Lotus Sutra is so far beyond that I've made a grave error in keeping them in some sort of equal relationship, central or not. It doesn't rely on these wings. This is the bird in the middle. And so was his humility, that he disbanded his whole school, his disciples. He said, you either go with what Tendai or Chiche is teaching, or you're not practicing correctly. And became Tendai's servant. Right? His atonement for his great arrogance. Again, Tzu-en of the Dharma Characteristic Schools, in his 7-volume and 12-volume Forest of Meanings in the Garden of the Law, states that one vehicle doctrine set forth in the Lotus Sutra is an expedient means, and that the 3 vehicle doctrines represents the truth. Getting it backwards, right? He also makes many similar absurd pronouncements, but In the fourth volume of The Essential Meaning of the Praising the Profundity of the Lotus Sutra, end quote, he is represented as saying that, quote, both doctrines are to be accepted, end quote, thus bringing flexible interpretation to the tenets of his own school. He's starting to shift. Although he said that both doctrines were acceptable, in his heart, he supported the Tendai teachings of the Lotus Sutra. But still, right, hadn't quite moved over. All right. We're going to start with Chen Quan of the Flower Garland School. But what Nichiren is talking about here is important to make note. That on the one hand, we hear him castigate a lot of these other schools for their errors, right? He has a whole treatise on the errors in 8 schools. And Nichiren doesn't shy away from being the stern parent, yeah? Stop it. Like this. This is Nichiren, right? He asks us to emulate him, so take note. But do you see that in these last few paragraphs, he's also demonstrating that, hey, it ain't just me, Nichiren. There's a deep history in Buddhism of great teachers, great bodhisattvas, like Chiche, Tendai, who have been stalwart in seeing the truth in the Lotus Sutra to the point, and in public debates, inspiring other teachers who have been misled or misinterpreted for themselves come to the realization that I'll be damned, he's right. And having the humility to get rid of their attachment to misleading interpretations of previous sutras. That's just what they are, provisional previous sutras. But they are not on the same level as the enlightening process that Tendai was elaborating on in his day. And so they shifted positions. It's not a new thing. A great many people need to go through this. It's happening today in our lives. You may be a product of that same kind of shifting narrative where you were exposed to true teachings, but what was mired around them became obviously unhealthy, unhelpful, created dissonance. And when you started to read or learn or study or meet a good friend who would show you clearly, look, it's obvious, it's saying this, suddenly all of that other garbage it has no hold on you anymore. That's karma busting, yeah? That's letting go of things that shouldn't have been held on to in the first place. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. What an amazing process. What an amazing practice. It takes some strength of will, some determination to the truth to keep us there. And this is why we practice every day, we chant every day to awaken that truth. Nothing else. Everything else is just entertainment. And entertainment is good, but it ain't the truth. Right? Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Thank you so much for your practice, for your dedication, for your strength. And in that regard, you need to have a healthy body, healthy life, right? So please take care of yourself. Keep your practice strong. Support this Sangha any way that you can. And we will grow our influence, our enlightenment, and our lives, most important. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. With deep gratitude, thank you. And I'll see you in the next one. Okay? Take care of yourself. And as always, Bye for now.